Good to be with you on what was supposed to be a Tuesday is now a Wednesday. Those of you who weren't here live will wonder what that means, and I'm not going to explain it. I've been asked many times, pretty much everywhere I go, this message is so powerful, so life-changing, real love. And frankly, I'm as amazed by it as anybody else. I don't consider it mine, so it still surprises me. And then people say, so why isn't it just covering the earth? Why doesn't the whole world embrace real love? Well, the answers, it seems, are really pretty obvious, but I'll state them anyway. It involves work, emotional, personal work, as opposed to entertainment. People would rather watch TV. And in fact, watch TV. Watch live TV and see what you see. Reality shows where we laugh at people and enjoy watching them fail. Celebrities. It is embarrassing what we pay attention to. We love to pay attention to problems. Somebody asked me the other day what I thought about a particular news thing, and I said, don't follow the news. And they said, well, why? I said, let me do the news for you. Oh my gosh. Oh, you just would not believe what happened. And that's what the news is like every night. It's inflammatory. Inflammatory voyeurism. We just love to watch other people in pain. Odd as it sounds, we even like to watch people in pain to feel moments of kind of vicarious compassion. We may not cross the street to help our neighbor, but we would weep at, say, watching pictures of people who were made homeless by a tsunami in Japan. It's still entertainment. It's not real life. Recently, there was a big scandal about some NBA owner who said something racist. Imagine. There are ignorant, unloved, unhappy people all over the world. But because this guy owns an NBA team, because he's a potential celebrity, for the last 10 days I've been watching this guy on TV. They've been following his every word. And here we are, all of us riveted to the tube, paying attention to a guy who's just ignorant and racist. And I promise you, if he's racist, he's also sexist and just pretty much generally unkind, has really little to do with race. And we're watching this, as opposed to talking about the solution to racism, which is love. So we talk about problems. If gladiatorial combat were made legal in our day, where people could get out in a ring and kill each other with swords, the stadium would be filled. Initially, people might be a little embarrassed to go, but they'd go, and they'd fill the stadiums. That's the kind of thing we like to do. Whereas real love involves introspection, honesty, vulnerability, possibly pain, as we realize our shortcomings. We're not really big on that. That's why you don't see a reality show called Look at Your Own Stupidity, for example. We like to look at everybody else's stupidity. Another reason, fear. We're just terrified. We're in pain all the time. We're afraid that anything that we do might potentially add to that fear, and real love could, in the short run, be uncomfortable. So no, we don't want anything to do with that. And last, it's kind of out of the norm. Being angry and contentious and sniping, and I love this word, it's a relatively recent word, which means it probably won't survive, snarky. We love to do that stuff, but loving, nah, that's just not nearly sexy enough. It's not romantic enough. It's not exciting. Which, by the way, simultaneously screams out the need that we have for it. One person wrote to me and said, I've now told quite a few people about my love journey with mixed results. Yeah, you think, because most people aren't prepared to hear about it for the reasons we talked about. But you're brave to try. Love is a message everybody wants. Everybody. But everybody's skeptical about it because love has presented to them in their lives in a variety of ways, almost none of which either felt good or lasted. So sometimes people are promised love and it feels really great, like falling in love when you're 16. There's no feeling like that in the world, but then it's gone. And so when somebody says, let's talk about love, we roll our eyes and go, I know everything I need to know about love, which means we don't know a darn thing. So most people can't even imagine it. You're brave to even give it a shot. You continue. There were multiple purposes to my trying to introduce real love to people. People knowing who I really am and getting closer to the people I care about. Me learning about myself, getting closer, or learning about the people that I talk to. Providing a proof to myself that real love works. And giving other people a genuine opportunity to learn about love. All really pretty cool reasons. Some of them completely selfless, some of them somewhat self-serving, but certainly not pathologically so. Way to go. You continue. While I've been learning a lot, got closer to my family, people don't really seem that impressed or interested in learning more about love, even the ones in my closest family. It makes me wonder how I could improve my approach to help more people see the truth that I experience. Do you have any suggestions? Yeah, actually. Relax. You don't have to become a missionary for real love. You don't have to become a zealot. Just be you. Let them see the genuine changes in you as a result of love. And if they see the changes and they're curious, let them ask what's different about you. Now, if somebody brings up the subject, my marriage is going to poop and I don't know what to do about it, that's pretty much an invitation for you to bring up the subject of unconditional love. Although if they show no interest after a couple of sentences, let it go. You teach people as they're ready. If you keep talking past where they show a lack of interest, it's just really kind of rude, actually. You continue. Should I be more direct about teaching people? Should I follow up my story with telling the truth about myself? Should I just give evidence by living it and not talking much about it? Is it that I just need to wait longer for the results of my actions to bear fruit? Again, relax. Be an example of real love first. When you talk to people, tell them what you've been learning, just like you would tell people if you'd been on a Caribbean vacation. So you say, lately I've been learning some things about love. And you say it in like 2 sentences. Really, I'm not exaggerating. 2. If they're interested, they'll keep asking you questions. The people who don't ask questions are not interested. And it's not likely that you're going to reach them in the near future. So let it go. Just take it easy. We're not in a big hurry. Bit by bit, you'll as people ask questions, you can say, well, go to the reallove.com website or whatever. But those opportunities will present themselves kind of naturally, or a word people like to use a lot these days, organically. Here's somebody who says, I have a 3-year-old adopted son whom I've had with me for 8 months. I give him a tremendous amount of love, but every time, capitalized, he has a bath or a wash or anything associated with water, he screams out loud in total panic, usually when water goes anywhere near his head or face. There's a smaller issue with his feet standing on water or on grass, maybe anything else damp. But the main issue is with his face and head. So what do you do? First thing is really kind of a practical thing. Having been a physician for decades, 3-year-old children are not filthy. Really. The sweat glands that stink in adults don't even exist yet. They haven't really matured in a kid who's 3 years old. So 3-year-olds need to be bathed, about 1/10 as often as mothers bathe them. Really. You take a wet cloth and you get rid of the, big glob of chocolate ice cream that just fell off the cone, mostly so it doesn't get on other people. It's not going to make the kid sick. And then just, lighten up. Remember that for the first 2 years before you got him, so he's 3 years old, you've had him for 8 months, he was being taught a model of the world that you don't know anything about. So you don't know the pain that he came from. Adopted children often come from environments that are starkly unloving, which is why they've been put up for adoption. Do the math. Considering his screaming reaction, it's highly likely that he's been severely traumatized with something. Now, it might have involved water. In fact, it's kind of likely that it did. Perhaps the most traumatic things were when he was forced and held down. Perhaps he was in an orphanage where they had to get the kids bathed kind of like in an assembly line. There are some countries that still have huge orphanages. And if it's time to bathe the kids, let me tell you, they bathe them like cars in a car wash. Let's get this over with. They force the kid down, bathe the kid, poof, and shove him off and get him dried and dressed. To a child, that would be violent. So probably did involve water, but that's not really the important point. He's certainly reacting to water now. And you're continuing the trauma as you continue to bathe his head and face. You're not listening to him. He's speaking. The screams are speech. Stop this. I'm terrified. And easily, the most immediate and powerful thing you can do to love a child, or frankly anybody, is to listen. His pain is very real to him, even if you don't understand it. Even if it doesn't make sense in your world, doesn't matter. He needs a break. You don't mean to, but you're making this worse. Now, you do have to deal with the fear, but why? So he can be clean? See, we get the wrong focus. No, so he's not afraid. So there are many ways to do this, to accomplish some measure of cleanliness without scaring the kid. So for a while, quit bathing his face. It's not going to kill him. Just watch what he can tolerate. Listen. Always remember, it's about love. So you're doing this because you love him. You're not doing this so you can get him to let you wash his face. Do you see the difference in attitude? This is about loving him, not bathing him. So for example, kids love it when you make games out of things. Love it. The scariest things. My kids weren't afraid of monsters because we made fun of them. We would watch monster movies. I would click pause and I would show them how they did that particular trick with the monsters. And we would all get a big kick out of it. And none of my kids grew up thinking monster movies were even worth looking at because they were, boring. They already knew how it was done and they knew what was coming. So wash your own face. Splash water in your own face and laugh hysterically. You're showing him that water isn't scary, as opposed to shoving his face in water. He thinks it is. You could have him splash water in your face. You could have him pour a glass of water all over your head. Now, you'd have to be willing to get wet, but kids love this stuff. My grandkids were just here days ago. And there's a thing I started doing forever ago with the younger one, or with what are now the older ones when they were younger. We go out and we swim in the lake, and they sit on the dock, and the bottom of our lake is all black, slimy, nasty mud. And the little kids just beg for me to go down to the bottom of the lake, get 2 great big hands full of this black goo and swish it all over my hair and face and nose and eyes, and then of course I come after them to eat them as the mud monster. It's a game. It's scary but not. And so you got a kid here where you got an opportunity to show him that it's scary but not, like the mud monster. So have him pour water on your head. And you have him do that as long as it takes till he becomes less afraid of water. Have him pour water in your face. Get a squirt gun and have him squirt you. Turn squirt guns into a game that you play outside long before you worry about washing this kid. Then eventually show him how to wash himself. Wash his own face. So it's not being done to him. Kids don't like stuff being done involuntarily to them. They don't like having their freedom to choose taken away from them. Have him wash yourself, have him wash you, the squirt gun, laugh as you're washing his arms, belly, whatever. Make it fun. If you can get a kid to laugh, it's pretty much impossible for a laughing child to be afraid. But remember the real point. It's about loving. So when the kid finally trusts you because you're listening to his fear, eventually you watch, because I've been through this with a number of parents whose children had a phobia about whatever. Spiders, dogs, water, name the thing. We've gone through this routine. And eventually it turns out that bathing's something they look forward to. Those are the kids, who turn into the swimmers in the family. Just make it about love, honey. Here's a member who says, I've had the flu over the last couple of days. My wife, Susie, odd how many people are married to somebody named Susie, is unbearable when I'm sick or have a medical problem. She keeps coming up with solutions and remedies, herbs, pills, nebulizers, salves, and more. So now I have to fight the disease and fend off her efforts to control me. It's exhausting. In fact, some days it makes me want to go to work sick. It would be easier to go to work sick than stay home and be beaten up with remedies. So it's pretty clear she's meddling. And she has mixed motivations in her defense. Part of her actually cares about you and wants you to feel better. But the other part is not so selfless. She wants to feel valued. And when you're sick, she has a role. We see the same kind of thing with young mothers. When there's a child who's obviously needy and accepts every little bit of attention that they get, well, then the mother is filling a clear role, and we love little babies. But when kids get to be teenagers and they don't need us quite as much and they take their own positions on things, we're not quite as patient with them because we don't have such a clearly defined role. You continue. I need to remember that she's trying to help, but I have a hard time remembering that when I feel sick. We made a list of the remedies that she has proposed, so she won't propose any of these twice. We'll see how this works. I'll help you. It won't. You'll lose the list. It's really complicated to keep a list of things that somebody's not supposed to do. Children do this with their parents and consequences. They want a list described of all the consequences for each thing they do wrong. It turns into a legal library. She'll forget. Keep it simpler. Right now, you're putting up with her health suggestions. You're tolerating them out. That sounds kind, but it's not, because it's stressing you. It's hurting you in the long run because it builds up and then you resent her. Anything that causes resentment, you can't let it keep going. Even if in the moment you go, oh, that's okay, I can put up with this. Yeah, kind of, but not really. So you got to stop this. You got to tell her that when you're sick, now you can do anything you want to. I'm just telling you what works. Either one, you'll ask her for her help, so that puts it all in your court. Or she can ask you if you want help. And then you can say no, or you can ask what she proposes. But otherwise, no unsolicited help, period. See how much simpler this is? A long list of previously suggested remedies, or you ask her for help, or she asks you if you want it. Keep it simple. And then you both feel more loved and loving, which is really the point, right? Here's a member who said, last week you talked about children understanding the connection between their family privileges and their family responsibilities, and how when they only get the privileges without the responsibility, they get a sense of entitlement. In fact, a deadly sense of entitlement. How do I make amends for so many past mistakes with my two daughters who are now 19 and 21? I did not teach them responsibility. And for now, they are financially dependent on me and still in full-time education. They're also at home with me during university vacations. Obviously, I don't know these two girls, so I don't know if they feel entitled. But if you're talking about the mistakes you made, and if it resonated with you what I said about entitlement, it's highly likely that these two kids feel entitled. They're financially dependent. They always have been. People tend to become addicted to being dependent. They come home with you during university vacations because, well, you feed and clothe them and otherwise take care of them. So let me try to answer your question based on the little information I have. Tell them that you've screwed up. Sit them down and say, look, I blew it. I have supported you probably too much and too long. And have not adequately taught you responsibility. Now, one reason I conclude that is that you don't mention that they have any responsibilities for chores or anything, or that they have any responsibility for any of their finances. You didn't just say that they were partially financially dependent. You said dependent. So almost unavoidably, they feel entitled. So you say, look, I screwed this up. You say, now it's my job to teach you responsibility. So I'm going to. I realize I haven't done that up to this point. Well, too bad. Lucky you that you got to be supported this long. And then you teach them what I call graduated independence. Now, you don't have to do this, but since you asked, I'm going to describe to you what works. You draw out, as in write out, on a piece of paper so they can see it, how much money you will be giving them each semester or year or month or however you want to do it, gradually decreasing what you give them until they're independent, completely independent. And I would recommend you not drag this out too long. So for like 1 to 2 years. Now, the younger one, who's 19, is going to scream bloody murder that the older one then got to be supported longer. Yeah, don't fall into that pit, because it's a pit of tar you're never going to get out of. You just say, yeah, well, too bad. I knew less then. My oldest son sometimes would say to me about the younger kids, and he'd say, well, you didn't do it that way with me. My answer was always the same. He quit doing it. I said, I was dumber then. So you just start over. You don't have to make up for the amount of money you gave to the oldest one by giving it to the younger one, which just teaches her more entitlement. Don't fall for that. You're learning to do this differently. Now, as you the reason for the gradual decrease in what you give them is to prepare them. Now follow the graph. I don't know if you can see this. You're giving them less and less so that they can become more and more financially independent, so they provide for their own finances. If you decrease the money that you give them and they don't do anything to become financially independent, well, then they're what we call technically screwed. And you got to tell them, I am not going to make up for this. So don't test me on this subject. I'm going to decrease what I give you. And that means total. Tuition, living allowance, whatever. You decrease, and then they can choose what they want to. So, for example, I've done this with hundreds of families. Sometimes the kid discovers that with their total allowance, they can't afford to go to the same school. I've known parents who've raised I'm not saying your children are this way, but I've known parents who've raised exceptionally entitled, snotty, irresponsible, pretty much useless to themselves and everybody else's children, and they've supported them through private schools at $40,000 a year or more. And so what they got out of the other end is similar to what grass turns into when it goes through a cow. These kids can't do anything. So you give them a great school education, but at the expense of what? Turning them into kind of helpless, crippled children. So they might have to change schools. They might have to go, one kid who was going to a privileged private school, his dad described what he was going to do with his money, and the kid had to quit and go to the local community college. Oh my goodness, the kid had a fit. Was mad at me, was mad at Dad. Dad said, I've got to give in. No, don't give in or the kid won't learn anything. I just talked to this kid a week ago, and the kid said, thanks for helping me through that. The kid got all A's at the community college. Then he went from the community college to a public school where he continued in the same major that he'd had at the private school and is now in the process of getting a great job in a great field where he's going to make good money because the dad was willing to teach the kid to work. No kid who hasn't been taught how to work, when you first start teaching them how to work, ever says, thank you, Father, for teaching me responsibility. No kid does this. And in fact, for most kids, it's many years before they're grateful for these lessons. They might have to give up cars. I don't know if they have cars, but they might have to give them up completely. I rode a bicycle to school every day, all the way through medical school, and it was 15 miles each way. I hear this all the time. Oh, I don't have a way to school. How far is school? Oh, it's 2 miles. No kidding. Two whole miles or 2.5 miles? So at most, that would be, if you were just lollygagging, an hour of walking. And on a bike, it's nothing. 2.5 miles on a bike isn't even a warm-up. And bicycles are cheaper than cars, it turns out. So they might have to give up some stuff. They might have to live in less than prosperous housing. One couple I know decreased the funds to their sons who had been living in luxury condominiums. I knew the university they lived at. I knew the name of the dorms, or it wasn't dorms, it was apartments they were living in. I didn't live in a place that nice until I had my medical degree. Actually, long after that. Why should they live in luxury at the expense of their parents? So they had to change the place they lived. Children don't learn much from prosperity. Most of us don't. Just entitlement. We learn from challenges. We learn from difficulties. We learn from problems. And what do we want most for our children? Do we want our children to be entertained? Do we want their lives to be easy? Or do we want them to be strong and happy? It's a choice. And if we fall for the entitlement thing, well, you need to give me, then we just cripple them. Here's a member who says, I started watching the archived video chats and I'm learning a lot. Well, cool. That's why all this is here. It's an enormous resource, huge, all the hours of video chats and stuff for information and for experience. And if you listen closely, you can even feel the love. I don't just answer questions. If I was just doing that, I could just write books and type up answers to people's questions and put them on the internet. It's my mission in life to teach, but more importantly, to love. So you can actually feel that in a video chat, if you're paying attention. You continue. I went to a seminar that you did recently, and one of the highlights for me was when you opened your seminar expressing your dedication and love for us. You talked about the time that you'd be giving us at the seminar, and then I never saw you take a break or be alone for a second all day for 2 days. And I understand that you were completely busy even after that at your hotel. Sheesh. Your actions told me all I wanted to know. Love isn't a subject. Love's a power. Love's a mission. It's fun. I love doing this. And it's also demanding. But I still love doing it. People are in pain. They react badly to their pain. And very often don't want to hear what they need. So they kick and they spit and they want to be out of pain right now, which is the whole reason people are addicted to attention, power, sex, money, excitement, pick a thing. They want to be out of pain right now and not be responsible for their pain. And that's my hope, is to teach people enough that they can learn to be responsible, feel loved enough that they'll want to continue that path, and eventually become responsible for changing their lives. You continue. I'm in a relationship with a woman that I'm not naturally attracted to, meaning I was not attracted to her appearance, personality, or energy, but I was receptive to her interest in me. So I asked, how long have you been in a relationship with her? I asked that by email. He said, almost 2 years. She lives in another country, and I moved there to the other country to be with her. She has a 7-year-old daughter from a previous relationship where the previous partner was a drunk and abusive. I don't come from real love, although I want to, or at least think I should. I was married for a short time once way back in 1980, and I'm coming from a place of desperation and not wanting to be alone. So you're in a tough place. You don't know how to be unconditionally loving. You don't know what it's like to feel unconditionally loved. You've already said that in this relationship, what really attracts you to this woman is that, well, she's receptive to you, which just means that she doesn't throw you out and reject you. That's a really low bar for a relationship. So you don't know how to love. She doesn't know how to love. She comes from an abusive relationship. So I'm not criticizing and I'm not telling you what to do, but why even try to have a relationship with her? Actually, at this point in your life, why even try to have a relationship with anybody? You're just not ready for it. You've only been with her for a short time. You're not married to her. Why not start over? Unless, of course, she shows a wild and crazy interest, I mean, like really determined interest, to learn about real love and learn about it with you. You continue. I think she loves me about as well as anyone could. Oh, that's a problem. She might love you as well as you have known. She might love you as well as you've seen anybody else love, but she couldn't possibly love you as well as anyone could, which is what you just said. For you to say this means that you're simply unfamiliar with what's possible. You haven't seen the real thing, so you're settling for her just being, well, not rejecting you. That's not enough to sustain a relationship. You continue. I accepted her lead in the relationship because with women, I lack confidence and knowing what I want. That's a huge problem, honey, which virtually guarantees the relationship's doomed unless both of you become really kind of fanatically interested in developing your experience with real love. You don't know what love is. She doesn't know what love is. You're accepting her lead, which means you're just kind of hoping she's going to show you the way. You lack confidence with women, so you lack confidence with relationships. This doesn't stand a chance unless something really dramatically changes. So get a coach. Get a coach who will do an intervention. You're talking about the rest of your life. You're talking about raising a 7-year-old child with this woman. This isn't little stuff. You're at the place where piddling around with reading a book is just not going to cut it. You said, in entering the relationship with my typical fearful, we'll see what happens attitude, I do that because I don't feel good about myself. yet another reason for you not to be in a relationship until you can learn to feel good about yourself, until you can feel the unconditional love of somebody to the point where you realize that you are worthwhile. Because right now, every word you've said bespeaks your lack of belief in your worth. You continue. I think she had a couple of objectives. Getting away from her daughter's father, that would be a pretty terrible reason to have a relationship. And providing her daughter a better education, because I would be somebody who might be able to make this happen. These are just horrible reasons for a relationship. They just can't sustain one. So both of you would have to become really powerfully interested in finding and sharing real love with each other. And it sounds like accepting the lead of other people has been a pattern for you and a problem. And I asked that question in an email. We were able to exchange a couple before answering this question. And he said, yeah, it really has been a pattern and a problem. So because you don't know what you want, or for that matter, even really know who you are, people find you who can see that about you and use you. And that simply never turns out well. So you're going to have to learn how to find love and how to share it with somebody else. You keep going. I've been generally unhappy with life and with myself forever. No surprise there, which again would virtually guarantee that you can't have a loving relationship with this new woman. It might be funner. It might be fun in the beginning that she accepts you, doesn't throw you out. It would be a more accurate description of what you said. But your general unhappiness would make you needy and afraid, and that combination's just death. You continue. Pretty obvious from your teaching, meaning me. You said, pretty obvious from your teaching. I'm on my 5th book. I suspect that even if she did real love me, and I felt such a love, my habitual unhappiness would sabotage wanting to stay in the relationship anyway. So it sounds, you say so much actually with just a few words. It's very unlikely from what you say that your present partner could actually love you unconditionally. And even if she did, you wouldn't know what to do with it because you have no experience with it. And notice that rather than have contact with real love people, you're on your 5th book because it's detached, it's impersonal, it's not threatening, it's safe. You got to break this pattern and really get intensively involved with not just real love, but with people in real love, with a coach, with conference calls, with possibly an intervention someday. And I don't care with who, but this has got to get serious or this pattern of relationships is just going to continue. I forgot about this. Should have read ahead. You said, I'm going to have an intervention with a real love coach at the end of the month. Smart you. You need a different way of living. Not just a different kind of relationship, a different way of living, completely different. So I'm glad you're getting an intervention. You were looking at the, Here's a member who says, my husband George told me last night that he had texted you, that the stress is building at work. He's spending more hours there, and he's worried that I'll complain about his not being at home. I was hearing him imply to you in his text, you being me, that I have been giving him grief about the hours that he was working. Honey, irrelevant. We worry so much about how we will look when other people describe an interaction that involves us. We insist on getting the details right. You do, especially. But the details don't matter because you were mentioned only incidentally. He was describing his fears and you weren't listening. You were defending yourself. He was talking about him. You were talking about you. That conversation's doomed. If you defend yourself, he'll just be more afraid, and then it gets worse. You continue. My first reaction was defense, I noticed that, because I have not complained about his hours at work. And again, I'm going, irrelevant. You said, I messed up and said, well, I haven't said anything about your hours. See, you're thinking about you. Then you continued talking to George, your husband. You realized that he, meaning me, took what you said to mean that I have been complaining about your hours when I haven't. It's not intentional, but you completely screwed up that interaction. I mean, you really blew this one. You defended yourself, which didn't help, because as soon as you defend yourself, who are you talking about? You. And he was talking about him. So now he's confused and frustrated and empty and more afraid, and it just gets worse. Number 2, you don't know how I took it. So when you said, well, you know how he took that, you don't know. So how could he know? So you spoke for me, which was wrong, because I didn't take it the way that you interpreted it. And 3, you have complained about the hours that he works, because I know you. There was an incident recently where you complained that everybody else was leaving work, but he was staying to finish something up. And then he texted you to let you know that he was staying, and so he might miss a scheduled dinner with you and your daughter. And you did complain, sort of loudly, actually. He has a difficult job where he feels like he's over his head, and there's an inspection coming up that could affect whether he's employed at all, and he's worried about it. And your response is to complain about his hours and to defend yourself about how you might look to other people. So this interaction would just go terrible. You continue. I did not use a harsh tone. I love this one. I love it when people say, I wasn't angry, but I said, I hate you very much. Almost never, I would say, unless people are pretty experienced with expressing their feelings, can they say accurately, I was angry or I was not. I was harsh or I was not. We're blind to it. And when you're blind, it's not intentional blind. Blind is blind. So you're blind to your blindness too. So you said, I did not use a harsh tone, but it didn't matter. The words were enough. You probably did both. Then I saw the shame on his face. He said, I feel like I have done something wrong. Which is exactly what you were telling him. Then you said, I probably should have said, you didn't. But instead I said, did I say you did? Now we're arguing words and semantics and who said this and who said, you're still defending yourself. And this is the pattern I've been talking about. You hear attacks all the time. So you heard your George attacking you when he wasn't. Then you respond by attacking him. Then you wonder why he becomes defensive and shuts down. Recently, we had an email exchange, you and I, where you misinterpreted what I was saying, and you defended yourself instantly and with many words. I can't now even remember the content. I just remember you were defending yourself. You defend yourself quickly, and you don't do well when it's pointed out that you're defending yourself. So see, George would be screwed. You defend yourself. He'd say, well, I feel like I've done something wrong. Then you would defend that and say, no, I wasn't saying that, when, yeah, that is what you were saying. This would become so confusing to both of you. Relax, kid. I'm just pointing out what you do. I'm not telling you to change it, just helping you to see it, not criticizing you. Then you say, later we talked, and he said he didn't feel bad anymore about what he'd texted you, but I think there may still be a mess. So how can I clean this up now? Yeah, almost certainly there is a mess, and it's because of how you defended yourself and got irritated with him. So you could say something like this. I'm not telling you what to say. Just here are some words that work. You could say to him, George, when you talk to me about your hours, I did not listen to you. You were telling me that you were afraid of how I would react. I didn't answer your fear. Instead, I defended myself, focusing on how right I was about a particular point. I should have said, and I'm saying now, that, honey, I'll support you in your job. I know this is a scary time. If you have to work longer hours for now, well, so what? I'll be there to support you, and I won't nag you when you don't come home at an hour that would be convenient to me. Then you told me that you didn't want to work those long hours, and I didn't listen to that either. I should have said that the long hours and the long drive are a huge drag for you. I should have listened to you. And I appreciate your willingness to do that for me and our family. I really blew it when we talked. That's an example of telling the truth. Just tell him how you blew it. Don't defend yourself. You continue. The evening went fine. We spent the next hour sitting close on the couch till George fell asleep and went to bed. After he went to bed, I realized I did have a problem with the hours. I should have read ahead. We just usually don't see our true attitude. We say, well, I wasn't irritated. Yeah, we were. Then you continue. I may not have said anything yet, but it was bothering me. And see, he feels that. You said, he's working 7 days a week, and he's working long hours, and I don't like it. And he's not clear how long this will go on. So when I ask, he says, a while. Now, think about it, honey. Why does he say a while instead of being specific? Because what if he says, well, these long hours are going to go on for 2 more weeks. Then what if it turns into 3? Then you'll attack him. And he knows that. So he stays vague. I don't know. Even when he may actually know. You continue. I don't know what a while means. Well, no, you don't. But more important than you're not knowing what a while means is you don't like it. You don't like the vagueness. You want to squeeze out of him a number. And he can feel your pushiness. It's an energy about you, honey. You scare your own husband. And that doesn't make for a happy relationship. In the meantime, you continue, we have no time together, and what time we do have, he's exhausted. While he works these hours, I will be a single parent. I'll have to do all the chores around the house and work a full-time job. It feels overwhelming. Well, yeah, it is. It's a huge thing to have a spouse absent like that. I get it. But it might help you, maybe, to see your options. You expect him to support you. You expect him to support you emotionally, and he's barely surviving emotionally and physically. So in the short term, you'll have to get support from somewhere other than him. Really. From other people in the real love community. That's an option. That could save your marriage all by itself. When you have people that you know unconditionally love you, then you don't put nearly the demands on any one person in your life. That's why it's really important we have multiple people that care about us. You're more critical toward him than you realize. That adds to his emotional burden. And it also makes him want to stay longer at work. That's the second option, is for you to realize that very likely, as you're kinder to him, he'll choose to come home sooner. I can't count how many people have told me that they stay at work because going home is such an unpleasant thought. Remember, I just read something from a member who said when he's sick, he'd rather go to work sick than stay home and listen to the badgering of his partner. And just from what you've said so far, George would be put off by all the badgering and just want to stay away. And then when he comes home, this is not intentional on his part, then when he comes home, the two of you don't talk much. He says he's exhausted. What's he really saying? I don't want to get into another one of those exhausting conversations where you tell me what I should be giving you emotionally. That's what he's really saying. Physically, he can take the schedule. He's a young guy. He's healthy. But he's exhausted emotionally. Third option. If you're filled up and if you're working to love him, your burden will actually seem easier, far easier, being a what you call temporary single parent. Sure, we all go through that from time to time. It will seem easier than if you're feeling resentful about what's going on. Way easier. The biggest burdens we carry around are not the jobs we have to do. It's resentment. it's anger, it's fear. Those things just wear us out. You might consider that the alternative is that you complain at him all the time, and eventually the emotional burden crushes him, then he has no job. And you guys are back to fighting to survive financially, as you once were. Good thing to remember. You continue. I've tried to get clarification on whether these hours are required or if he's doing it out of fear. Oh, honey, you got to stop that. You're interrogating him. George, so are you staying at work because you have to, or are you staying there because you're afraid of work, or are you staying there because you're afraid of me? Honey, you sound like the Gestapo. And he's going to avoid conversations with you. You don't mean to, but you do interrogate him. You're too critical to be able to get that kind of information from him. That is the kind of information a wise person could help him with. So in this case, me. I could talk to him about his job and his fears, and I have. And we're actually coming up with a plan. And he's like going, I could do that. And he's answering my questions. And he's not afraid. But as soon as you ask him a question, boy, he just shuts right down, because you have that volcano in you of resentment and anger that you think you're not showing, but you really are. So pretty much anytime you ask him a question, he's going to feel attacked. He will. May not be fair, but that's how it's going to feel. So he needs your support and your love, and I'll ask him questions. You said he's made it clear that he has not asked his supervisors what their expectations are or what is required. So my belief is he's choosing to work these hours out of fear only. Judgment, 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 honey. And these judgments are just seeping out of your pores and flaming from your eyes. His choice affects me, and therefore it is my business. I can just hear the tone with which you're writing this. This is my business, so he will answer my question. You're going to kill him, sweetie. His job won't, but you will. You just can't have these discussions with him. He's too afraid of you, and for good reason. You're pretty intense. A lot of his hours are out of fear. I've talked to him about it, and I'll continue to talk to him about it. If you have information to share with me, great. I'll have more to talk to him about, but you can't ask these questions. That was kind of an important interaction between a husband and wife, because they're very common. Sylvie Story. Sylvie, my granddaughter. So my daughter, Jeanette, writes and says, today, Sylvie colored all over her hands, legs, and feet with a black pen. When I walked by, she asked me, Mom, is this pen washable? I love this kid. When I saw her, this is Jeanette still speaking, I decided that I better have some time to calm down before I talk to her about it. Always a good idea as a parent. You do not have to deal with anything in the moment unless there's arterial blood spurting or somebody's about to walk out into traffic. So she said, I decided I better have some time. I replied, please wait in your room. She immediately put out her hand, Sylvie did, because we usually hold hands as we walk to her room together. Are you parents listening to this? She does this way better than I did when she was a kid. My kids are all better parents than I was at their age. Better parents than I am now, probably. So instead of just saying to a kid, go to your room, which is what we tend to do, in which case now, because of our anger, it feels like a punishment and the kid hates it and learns nothing. No, there are times that Jeanette says, Sylvie, you go to your room while I think this over, or you go to your room while you think something over. And instead of sending her, they hold hands on the way there. Oh, this is priceless. I didn't think of this. She thought of it. She came up with this on her own. Jeanette continues, I turned on the light in her room and left the door open, and Sylvie cheerfully went on her bed and started singing songs. Just in case you wondered, I don't remember as a child being sent to my room, sitting on the bed and singing songs. After a few minutes, I returned to her room where she repeated the question. Because remember, she started off with the question, Mom hasn't answered it yet, and so Sylvie has not forgotten the question. Kids remember their questions when they're not answered. She says, is this pen washable? I ignored her question and asked her, do you know why you went to your room? She said, yes, I colored on myself, which is the rule. You don't get to write on yourself. Sylvie is still not going to let go of this question. She says, Mom, this is the third time now. Calm. She says, is this pen washable? Jeanette finally says, I answered that it was. Then she replied, great. So can I have a bath? This kid would have 8 baths a day. She loves this. As I was pouring the bath, Jeanette says, I thanked her for not coloring on the couch where she was previously sitting, because it would not be washable if she colored on that. She felt like she had done me a favor, and she had. I love reading the examples of what's possible for parents who have been taught unconditional love from a sufficiently young age that they can raise their children from birth with real love. And this is how their kids turn out. Better than mine did. So, pretty fun stuff. Sometimes the answers seem complicated. Almost never are they. If we remember that the question is about love, not pens on skin. The question is about love, not how late my husband stays at work. The question is about love and not homemade remedies. The question is always about love. And if we remember that, if we can find the love and feel it, the anger melts, and so do the people around us. I'll see you on the next Tuesday chat.